over a year old, correct?
Year and a half.
Year and a half, okay. And then David Sidebotham, who is on every single episode except one, I think, of the Jacob Sessions, is my co-host. And David is a graduate of Biola University and longtime friend, longtime collaborator here on the Christian Manifesto with the Jacob Sessions especially. I think this is probably episode, I'm keeping track, probably episode 22 of this program. So we've been doing this a while now, which is kind of fun. Well, almost 2 years at this point. So, so we're going to be talking about, we're actually already recording, and I don't know if Josh or Kara, if you've listened to any of the previous podcasts, but thank you so much for joining in. A couple ground rules. It is okay to disagree with one another. I don't think there's going to be too much disagreement on this particular on this particular matter, but it's okay to disagree with each other. It's okay to ask for clarity. It's okay to passionately disagree with one another. We invite that here on the Jacob Sessions. We wrestle with God. We wrestle with one another. It's kind of the moniker of this podcast. And so also, there's going to be no introduction on this podcast. The podcast, literally, I just find a good spot to edit in, and it kind of starts in the middle of the conversation. It's not meant to be a conversation ender, or we figured everything out by the end of this conversation. Rather, it's to kind of spark conversation. This one, I think, can come from a decidedly Christian worldview. I don't think we can help but do that. Our last podcast, the one we recorded right before this, I don't think we mentioned anything about God or the Bible or anything like that. It was just kind of a very practical conversation. But this one, I think, we're not going to be able to avoid Christian understandings of marriage and love and relationship and things like that in order to have this discussion. So that being said, let me bring up my email real quick, because I was surprised when I read this article. I don't know why I was surprised, because this just happens to yeah, anyway.
Exactly that.
Seems to be the way that the culture is going in a way. So let me get back to my email here. Okay, so the question. So this explain it a little bit. Obviously, this article has come out. It was picked up by CNN Living. At least that's where I came across it. I guess it's an article from Redbook, and it's written, interestingly enough, by Anonymous, which I have my thoughts on to begin with. It's written by Anonymous, and as told to Anna Davies, and so it was picked up by CNN. I'm guessing it was a slow news day at CNN. If anybody saw the White House press correspondents' dinner, they just ripped CNN to shreds. Like, it's basically kind of on its way out anyway. So they're just reporting anything that comes across their desk at this point. And this was something that came across their desk. This article called "How Affairs Make My Marriage Stronger." And it's written... I'm trying not to judge before we even talk about it.
Just judge. It's pretty bad.
Okay, so the article is...
I never say that, but in this case, you can judge.
So there's no video or audio that we could play with this. So we've created a link where we're linking people to the article if you want to read it, if you can stomach the whole thing. But it's essentially an article about a woman who is talking about how her and her husband have a marriage. They obviously they're married, and they have affairs. It is not an open marriage. It is a closed marriage in terms of what they tell each other. It is a very don't ask, don't tell kind of relationship. They have children together, but they both know that they're having affairs with other people, but aren't saying anything about it, are not discussing it, aren't bringing it up, and are saying, in fact, this strengthens our marriage. I know I love my husband. I know he's who I'm going home to be with, but I have these other needs over here, and so we have sex with multiple people. And as long as he doesn't tell me and I don't tell him, we can assume that it's not happening. essentially. We know it's happening, but we assume that it's not, is essentially what this woman says in this article. There are a few points, of course. Human beings, she gets jealous when she was pregnant at one point, and he was still out, having sex with other people, and then he kind of changed up on that when she communicated that she was upset about it. But then as soon as they got into the routine of raising their kids, they went back to their old ways of cheating on each other. So that brings up our question for tonight. Can read the article, but the question I want to consider is, why are affairs becoming more and more accepted in the prevailing popular culture? Does the continued erosion of the definition of marriage and the addition of new sexual relational norms make it difficult to cast judgment on these types of arrangements and understandings within modern marriages? So let's look at that first question, I guess. Why are affairs becoming more and more accepted in the popular culture? Why is this happening?
Maybe I'm out of touch, but I didn't know that they were. Like, my first reaction is, why in the world would you put that forward as normal?
I'm not saying that we're putting it forward as normal, but it's being more and more accepted. It's being more and more accepted by people, and I want to know why that is.
By normal, though.
I think that we, just people in general, want to act very enlightened when they hear this kind of thing. Like, oh, aren't we so above traditional marriage that we can do these things and it doesn't hurt us? So these traditional values are clearly crap. And you find that with lots of things, but that's when I read this, she kept going back and forth, this is so great for our marriage, and then she'd say, well, I don't know how long we can keep this up. And then she'd go back and say, I just love that I can always, win him back if I need to. And then she'd say, but I'm afraid he might leave me for someone else. She was just going back and forth all the time. So she was contradicting herself constantly, but then at the end was like, well, it just keeps the spark alive.
I like the way she was saying. She started off and she's like, "Oh, this is very French that you can have a marriage and affairs that mean and affairs at the same time and still have a strong marriage." And I'm thinking that it's just very this sort of aha, I have a unique idea, I have a new idea. It's better than the old ideas, just for the fact that it's new and for the fact that people like to buck tradition. People like to, I think, spit in the face of tradition a lot of times, especially when that sort of social and tradition has a moral and religious background to it, especially.
I still can't get past it, because it's like, let's be enlightened. We'll celebrate acting like a chimpanzee. I mean, quite literally, chimpanzees are as faithful as that.
Well, I think chimpanzees might be more faithful than this woman is, to be honest. If
Jaime Lannister is more faithful than that.
So, Game of Thrones reference, way to put that in there. So there is, I saw this meme on Facebook at one point. There's this huge show on right now called Scandal, right? And I watched the first season and I really liked it. And then I saw this meme and I was like, whoa, that's so right. But it's the first part of this thing says, girls be like, I'm going to cut my man if he ever cheats on me. And then underneath it's a picture from Scandal, and then it says, but on Thursdays they be like, aww. and this woman, I guess the premise of the show is the President of the United States is cheating on his wife with the main character from Scandal.
Don't ruin it for me.
Right. And so on Thursday nights, Kara's like, "Oh, I want her and the president to be together because they're supposed to be right." And so, that's kind of. I hate to continue to demonize the media because we did that in the last episode here, but there seems to be this kind of idea within pop culture, within literature. You've got 50 Shades of Grey, where you've got really deviant sexual practices going on, and if you talk to people who are practicing those kinds of things, they'll be like, well, that's not really deviant. There's really crazy deviant stuff out there, and this is just kind of slightly fetishized or whatever. And so you've got people who are being inundated with ideas of, okay, it's okay to have an affair. It's okay to have really deviant sexual activity. It's okay to call into question norms in terms of marriage and dating and courtship, and we're all going to be the better for it. And I think because of that message that we're being inundated with, it is no small thing for CNN, or CNN doesn't even bat an eye to post this. Now, CNN, of course, didn't comment on it. They just posted the story as is. But here's something that's newsworthy. This woman's having an affair. Her husband knows she's having an affair. He's having an affair. She knows he's having an affair. And they don't talk about it, and their marriage is stronger. Here's a message we want to get out there. Could affairs make your marriage stronger? Is kind of the tacit question that CNN puts out there by posting this story at all. Because someone who might not have thought of this might come across this and go, huh, interesting.
Maybe the fruit will make you like God.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe if I eat from this tree, I'll be like God. I don't know.
I think that's giving CNN a little too much credit. To be honest with you,
I like to assume positive intent here. Okay, I like to assume positive intent.
They looked at it and they said, people will comment on this. We're going to put it on our site. And that worked. And that worked. I really don't think, as evil as CNN is, I don't think they were trying to promote a moral agenda. I think they were looking at, like, how can we get our website more page views? Because whether you're a small-time blogger or you're CNN, that's what matters. And so the stories that get pushed to the front are not necessarily the newsworthy stories, or it becomes the normalization of the fringe, because the fringe is what gets talked about because it's what gets commented on. So everyone in the balance ends up being left out.
I think that's so right. If I had seen that on a tabloid cover, I A, would not have batted an eye, B, would have laughed and moved on, instead of actually talking about it on this podcast.
Right, yeah, very true. We have not had a...
We just have forgotten that CNN is now a tabloid.
We have not had a podcast yet about Bat Boy. We have not done that yet. So when we have that podcast, we will have jumped the shark officially. But still, the fact remains, okay, so let's say that, it was all about web hits or whatever. CNN, as much as, it may be circling the drain at this point in terms of being a newsworthy news source, still affects people. People still go to it. I know that my computer was set to it when I purchased my computer. Some of the bookmarks were automatically towards the news site CNN. I'm not sure why, but maybe it was a deal with the computer company had with CNN. So automatically, I am brought to this website, or could be brought to this website, influenced by this website. I'm going through the story. Here's what's going on. They're reopening the Benghazi trial, and oh my goodness, okay, so this is going on over, and let's bring back our girls. And whoa, interesting. How affairs could strengthen my marriage. They're right up there with Benghazi being reopened and the girls being abducted in Africa. So for me, I think that still puts it in front of people in a way that could affect them in ways that otherwise, like you said, David, I would just pass this if this was on the tabloids. If it was on the front of the National Enquirer, I would just walk right by, right? Because, unless you're a part of the Men in Black, that stuff ain't real. So that's a Men in Black reference for those of you who are too old too young to remember it. Those are the hot sheets. Those are the hot sheets, everybody. But so here's the thing, though. This is moving beyond television. Okay, it's moved beyond television. It's moved beyond pop culture, literature, things like that. And this is now a news story of someone who's actually doing it. Online dating, and there are people who are open to things like polyamory, which is kind of this whole new, I'm in a committed relationship with this one guy, and we're very open, and we can see other people, though, because we can be in love with all these other people. And then you've got polygamy, that's, that's a big thing that's coming up now, because you've got shows that are being normalized, like Big Love on HBO or Showtime. I can't remember which channel it's on. Sister Wives. You've got a whole section at Barnes & Noble on polygamy at this point. You've got cases that are going before the Supreme Court about polygamy. This is a new thing that's being, well, why can't I love all of these people? So we're not even talking about like things like gay marriage, which, you know, that seems to be the debate is over there, I guess. But okay, that was the first thing to, I guess, attack traditional marriage, traditional understandings of relationships, and now we've got a lot of other things. Not trying to talk about slippery slope, not trying to talk about gay marriage specifically, but as norms about marriage and relationships are kind of questioned and eroded in our culture, can we even look at something like this woman is saying here? Yeah, me and my husband, we have this marriage. It's strengthened by our affairs. We don't ask. We don't tell. Everything's okay. Can we even look at this and say, this is wrong? Can anybody effectively look at it and say that?
You mentioned that, I mean, obviously I think that you can have a lot of thoughts about that, but you mentioned that there's polyamory was a new thing. And I would say polygamy is just an outcropping of polyamory, and this is obviously polyamory. I feel like that dates back in terms of its prevalence in American culture, at least to hippies with the free love stuff. And I know that it dates back further than that in terms of human history.
Well, absolutely, but I'm saying now it's being more accepted and normalized. But back then in free love, you could say you're just a bunch of dang hippies, right? You're just a bunch of hippies with your free love, and you're getting away from responsibility. Now it's being normalized in that the mainstream culture is beginning to accept these kinds of and that's okay for them. I can't judge them. So I'm wondering how we got here.
I think, I mean, then the article would say that if as long as it works for you, as long as you're both consenting in this, which you're right, would have been, even a few years ago, completely crazy. And the fact that it was in Redbook, I mean, Redbook is read by a lot of women. It's a big deal that it was in that. And just the idea that sex isn't a big deal. This is made out to be not a big deal. So if that's how you want to conduct yourself sexually, I mean, that's on you. And I think, I mean, that's obviously a load of crap, I think. But
it seems A, obvious that it doesn't really work because of the fears the woman's talking about, but B, I mean, what's disturbing like that is like, who wants sex not to be a big deal? That would be like saying, you know, my wife, how she looks, it's not a big deal. I'm not saying looks are about everything, but I mean, you want to be totally apathetic to how beautiful your wife is? You want to be totally apathetic to how you're emotionally invested in her body? You want that to be not a big deal? It's like saying steak, how it tastes, not a big deal. I could just as easily eat plastic. I'm like,
I think that's the interesting thing to me is that I can look at it and say, okay, inside my worldview, inside my paradigm of Christianity, then this obviously does not make sense. So, but outside Christianity, well then really, who is to say that's wrong? If truth is relative, if I can do as I feel, then, well, maybe if that's true for them, then well, go ahead, let them do it. But even then, how in the world does this make any sense? How does it strengthen a relationship? I don't
feel like even with my most secular friends, if I pitched this idea to them, they would look at me like a sunflower was growing out of my forehead. Like, I mean, I understand that there are people into weird ish, but I don't know. I just don't want to be sensationalist about it. I have a hard time believing that anybody could accept this. But I mean, clearly somebody accepted it because it made it onto CNN. So I'm having cognitive dissonance.
Well, I think that's the term, because I think that the author of this article is having cognitive dissonance too, because she begins like throughout the article, and I actually wrote down a couple of quotes here. She was like, you know, I don't want to actively seek out affairs, but yet there she is, like oh, you know, an affair just happened to me. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And then probably the one that really got at me was like, she goes, the affairs aren't my real life. So there's this like huge dichotomy that she's drawn in her life. It's like a Jekyll Hyde thing. She has put her life as, okay, I am mom, I am wife, and I'm like, this good little suburban family, and then I'm wild swinger over here, and those never the twain shall meet.
Sure.
Those two are completely separated in her mind into her and her identity.
It sounds like
you
she's
see that
using
struggle as she's writing it.
Yeah, it sounds like, Josh, would you agree maybe? It sounds like she's using the affairs like porn.
Yeah, I think that's a legitimate way of viewing it. Yeah, it's just and again, it takes that from other. If marriage is other centered, if your goal is to, if you're going to love your wife or husband, in the relationship, you want them to be happy. Where here, it seems like it's seeking out your happiness above all things.
Well, and it's also what it's doing. The way you're describing it is it's treating. Okay, so you're going off, you're doing all this sex. You say this isn't really real. This isn't really you. So what? Are you a voyeur to your own actions? It seems like it's objectifying it the exact same way one would say, well, I look at porn, but that's not my marriage. And it's kind of like
something has gone wrong with the sexual appetite. That's for sure. I think C.S. Lewis commented on this somewhat in Mere Christianity. But I just finished reading a book by Timothy Keller, who released it a few years ago, called The Meaning of Marriage. Mm-hmm. And he's talking about kind of this ongoing phenomena of people saying, well, people kind of cohabitating, living together, doing what married people do, kind of why buy the cow when you can, get the milk for free, that kind of deal. I actually was talking to a guy the other day who, understandably, he's come from a tough background in terms of seeing relationships in his life fall apart. People who, kind of questions whether his mom should have had as many kids as she did, given her issues, or his grandma, I want to say, and just seeing relationships around him all fall apart. And so he lives with his girlfriend. His girlfriend is just kind of heartbroken that he will not marry her, and he is just deathly afraid of marrying her because of all the marriages that he's seen fall apart. And he hasn't said this directly, but it kind of comes out of this society, this idea of, well, I don't need a piece of paper to show that I love you, And Tim Keller said, I actually have it open here. I want to read this. He said, so when someone says, I don't need a piece of paper to show love, you might say, yes, you do. If you love the way the Bible describes the love of two people who want to share their lives together, you should have no problem making a legal, permanent, exclusive commitment. And so I would question if what this woman has with her husband is in fact at all a marriage. Okay, now I didn't read all the stuff that came before that because he says so you need to go back and read what he was saying is the biblical worldview in regards to sex, which I'm guessing the four of us as Christians have a biblical framework. We may differ on a few things here as what's okay and what's not okay within a marriage, but we agree that a marriage is an exclusive covenantal relationship, right, to one another. So this woman, clearly not a Christian, clearly acting outside of the bounds of a Christian worldview, so I don't expect Christian behavior from her. But since God makes what marriage is a marriage, and so that's a whole other conversation. I believe God defines what marriage is. If God defines what marriage is, she is breaking the covenant that she has created with her husband, so that what they are continuing to live in, the relationship that they are continuing to live in, is not in fact a marriage in the sense of it being a covenant with one another. If you are continuing to invite other people in, even if you have a don't ask, don't tell, or whether it's an open marriage, or whether it's polyamorous, or whether it is polygamous or whatever, you don't actually have a marriage according to what God says a marriage is, according to Christian scripture. Now, there are a lot of people probably listening who are not Christians, and that's fine, but according to what the Bible says a marriage is, I would say that these two people do not have a marriage.
I would go so far as to say that what they're doing, even if you take an extremely secular... Oh, sorry, Kara, did you want to say something?
No, I was agreeing with Cal.
Oh, awesome. I'm trying to read your Facebook. I don't want to ramble too long, so I'm trying to watch to see if someone might be trying to get in the word edgewise while I'm going on. But I was going to say, I I think even from a highly secular perspective, where homosexual love, transgendered love, heterosexual love, all those loves are all the same. Even then, this is something different, because within that worldview, homosexuals are a gender type, transsexuals are a gender type. All these, I don't fully understand the worldview. I'm not part of that worldview, but it seems to me there's an idea where telling a person who is attracted to men that they can't, a man who's attracted to men that he can't marry a man is in some way discriminating him by something which society has identified him as being a minority. I feel like this is different from being a minority. This is someone who is a heterosexual, is in a heterosexual relationship, who is choosing to cheat, who is then trying to claim that in some way their cheating is healthy and is very obviously exhibiting signs of cognitive dissonance. And, I mean, you can point to how destructive this is for centuries to the children and the people involved in the affairs. You don't need the Bible to point to this and say this is highly destructive and has never, even in pagan circles, been accepted as being okay. So, Calvin, this is getting back to the original question. What do we do with people who say, oh, that's your love, this is another love? Even with the secular homosexual love is equivalent to heterosexual love sense, even within that context, unless you're dealing with a very, very, very extreme version of sexual normalization, I don't think you arrive at a conclusion where this makes any kind of sense. Which drives me to think is what pit in hell did this idea come from?
I can tell you exactly what pit of hell that came from. We want to talk about pits of hell. In the article, she says, to me, this is almost like math. You start off with, wrong sums. You're gonna or wrong numbers or whatever. You're gonna end up with the wrong answer, right? I'm not a mathematician. I'm more an English guy. But if you start off with a wrong premise, you're going to end up at a wrong conclusion. Okay? So if you go in with the premise that 2 plus 2 equals 5, if that's your premise, the conclusion you're going to arrive at is going to be 5, and that's going to be wrong. Okay? I mean, the actual answer is 4, right? So I look early on, she talks about where her relationship even started with this guy. She says, after 6 months of late-night booty calls, Dave and I settled into a proper relationship and started calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend. And so I'm like, I don't want to, obviously I'm not judging her. I mean, I, again, don't expect Christian behavior from non-Christians, but you're starting off saying, look, this is what we started with. We started off with late-night booty calls. We were calling each other up at 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, getting together for just sex. And then after 6 or so months of that, we settled into a proper relationship and called each other boyfriend and girlfriend, where sex is clearly continuing. And I'm like, wait, hold on. So now you're pressing in, I mean, not that people don't believe this already, but you're pressing into the culture this idea that this is a proper relationship. This is okay. Okay, or well, the booty calls and late night booty calls, that wasn't proper, but then we settled into a proper relationship by defining each other as boyfriend and girlfriend, and now those late night booty calls can happen at 4 in the afternoon. That to me is just not starting off at a right place, and it's going to create a lot of people, if they're not already there, who are going to end up with a very wrong answer because they're starting off with very wrong premises. It's like, oh, a proper relationship is just calling each other a boyfriend and girlfriend, and you can do whatever you want sexually at that point. Late night booty calls, that's not okay. But once you call each other boyfriend and girlfriend, gloves can come off and you can do whatever you want because it's proper.
I'll say in regards to this article, I really don't think love, the concept of love, has anything to do with it. I think it's completely about sex and the individual's own fulfillment. That's the basis of their relationship. And then it got to a point where it was like, hey, not only do we like having sex with one another, I think we might actually like each other a little bit as people too. Maybe we like each other as people enough that we are going to live together and at least share some small part of our lives. And now they have this, and this is how they think of it. It's like a tiered relationship, and then they're at the top of that tier. Their relationship is a little more intimate because they call each other boyfriend, girlfriend, now husband, wife, but they still want these lustful, these booty calls on the side, the same things that they were having before. So to me, the question isn't about love at all. It's purely about sex, and why that, going back to foundations here, why that is then divorced completely from the concept of love.
And she even makes the point at one point that the reason they do it is because they love each other, which was like blowing my mind. Because we're not the kind of people that would be able to get married normally because we both are so physical and love having affairs. Well, we're both together and we love each other so much. This is the only way to get married. So if we want to be married, we have to do this.
Yeah, instead of changing behavior, they change rules.
Right, exactly.
Now, here's the other thing, and Josh, you're married. Kara, you're married. So this question's more directed at you two. David and I are happily single.
Sure.
But okay, and Kara, you're the only one among us who has children at this point. Josh is apparently enjoying trying. So, yeah, that was a sex joke, everybody. So
my wife appreciates.
Your wife appreciates it. So she talks about having in this article. She talks about having kids, right? She talks about having, they got married several years later. They got married 7 years ago, and they have 2 sons, ages 4 and nearly 2. And I have often thought about people who are involved in the porn industry who have children. And I'm just like, man, if you're involved in the porn industry and men are watching this and then you got your kid and you're walking on the street and people are like, hey, I loved you in, Bang 'em All 16, it's just like, oh my gosh. So, I mean, you have children that you are raising in this world and you are a porn star, okay? And so now you're bringing your children, obviously your children aren't there in the room watching you have sex with these multiple people, but their life is implicated. They are now implicated in your sin, right? I would argue, and people can disagree with me on this, I would argue that those people, one, don't have a marriage, if they're married, but they also don't love their children if they are willing to put their children in that kind of a situation where shame is thrust upon them because they are doing something shameful as a way of life. Not because, I did this one sin this one time or maybe a few times and I got caught and I decided to change, and my children are implicated. But no, it's a way of life. What I am doing is not shameful. I'm going to raise my kids to think this is okay, even though I might protect them from it because they're not old enough. I would say they don't love their children the way that they ought to love their children. And so I guess my question then I would say then that this woman who is having multiple affairs does not, in fact, love her children. Because if someone finds out about this, like the whole world through CNN, well, even though she wrote anonymous, right? So that's the reason she wrote anonymous, because she loved, I would say she's trying to fool herself into thinking that she loves her husband and loves her kid here. People can disagree with me on that. That's fine. I may be sounding judgmental, but if you really believe in this, if you really think that this is okay, if you really think this is French or whatever you want to call it, you don't need to hide behind anonymity.
That's insulting to the French. Like, that's rude. How dare we take that and associate it with an entire culture?
Right, okay.
Check our privilege. We need to check our privilege here.
Yeah, just check our privilege, right? If she had said this has been all about, it's very black. We all are like, what? What? That's not even true. So I would argue that this woman doesn't love her husband. I would say that this woman isn't in a marriage. I would say that she doesn't love her children. I would say that she's not even a true parent. If she's willing to bring this kind of shame upon her family. And so my question for the two married people is not necessarily looking for agreement, but how do you see her in regards to raising children, but also living this lifestyle over here where it's okay to have sex with multiple people as long as she's not telling her husband.
I mean, it's complete compartmentalization. I mean, she's separating it because she said those affairs are not really her. So in her mind, she has herself believing that that stuff doesn't actually matter because she is a good mom when she's suburban Susie homemaker mom at home with her kids, devoted to her husband. She plays that role when she's there, and she switches it off to go out. I mean, it's the only way that you could do it and not go completely crazy. You would have to like end mommy time and go me time. That's the only way you could do it. I don't know if you guys have ever watched Freaks and Geeks. I love that show. But it's old. But there is an episode where one of the kids finds out that his dad is having an affair, and so he tells his big brother. He's devastated by the news, and the big brother's like, oh, yeah, Dad's been doing that for years. He's always done that. And the kid's like, oh, my gosh. And he goes and tells the mom, and the mom's like, oh, yeah, I know, honey. It's okay. And like everybody in the family is like, yeah, it's fine. This is just how we have a happy marriage. And the kid is he's just wrecked about it because like everything he's believed about what love looks like and what family looks like and commitment and loyalty has just been completely shattered by this one, his dad's one like vice, I guess, that everyone has accepted it's fine as long as it works for the rest of us. And I just like, it's such a sad episode to me because I just look at it and I just think he just knows in his heart that that's not right. Like he just knows that's not how it's supposed to be. And I can't believe there's any child that would, be raised in a situation where the mom and dad are going out sleeping with other people and not be totally messed up by that. Like your parents are forming everything that you know about life and how the world works, and how are they supposed to understand how you commit to somebody and how you put somebody else before yourself when they're not seeing anybody do that.
Yeah, I would want to say that, again, she is so compartmentalized. Like, I want to diagnose with schizophrenia because I really just don't know how to explain it. Because to her, again, she is the good mom. The problem is, even if she in her own mental state can compartmentalize what is happening, her children will not. They're not going to be able to see that. They're going to, and eventually the truth will come out. I mean, because Dad may be okay not asking questions. Dad may be able to say, I have questions I'd like to ask, but Mom and I, we've decided that we're just going to let things be. We don't talk about it. But kids are inquisitive by nature, and especially young ones, and they're gonna want to know. And as they get older, that's going to, I think, take an even more serious note rather than just kids asking out of innocence and naivety, to actually wanting to know what is Mom and Dad's lifestyle and what does that mean for me.
I think that brings up, I guess, a final question I wanna look at, which isn't entirely related to this, but is in a way, because what is at the foundation of their marriage is obviously not Jesus. What is at the foundation of their marriage are lies. Lies that they tell themselves, lies that they tell each other, whether verbally or by omission. I recently had a conversation with someone, and they were upset with me because I tended to err on the side of not radical truth-telling, but truth-telling nonetheless. I mean, does this dress make me look fat? Yes. Change. No, that's going to get you killed really quickly, right? But for the most part, I find that in the past, I have been very good at lying. I've been very good at getting someone to see me a certain way because I didn't want them to judge me, so I was going to lie because I didn't want them to have to handle the truth of who I really was. And then, of course, boom, the truth comes out down the road, because when you're lying to someone, you always have to remember who you told what. When you tell the truth, you don't. You can just, I told everybody the truth, right? So for me, I think that telling the truth is part and parcel to a healthy relationship. But I've run into a few people lately, and I don't fault them for their viewpoint, but I'm still wrestling with whether this is correct or not. But in a relationship, a romantic relationship, you shouldn't. There's this notion, even among Christians, that even in a godly, healthy Christian relationship, you don't have to share the truth about everything with your significant other, because it's not always helpful, especially in regards to, I'm speaking specifically in my life about my past. I don't want whoever I'm with to be surprised by something that pops up down the road and then be like, why didn't you tell me that? Now I'm embarrassed. Now I look stupid. This question's for all three of you, really. But obviously specifically for the two people who are in marriage relationships, what do you think about this idea of telling the truth, not telling the truth, omitting pieces for the sake of the relationship? Is that right? Is that not right? Am I looking at things too black and white? How does that work?
I think you're right. I think that when two become one, that's what that means. It means all your good stuff and your bad stuff together, and I think, yeah, there are things probably that might be hard to hear, and I think it's important to be delicate about those things. I know in my marriage, when my husband did confess things to me, but it was done in a way that was very sorrowful. Like he was very, I could tell that he regretted those things because our love was so special, and that it made us so much closer that he told me those things, even though I didn't love hearing them, but I loved how moved he was to tell me because of our love. So I think that's really, it's important.
I'm not married, but I agree with Kara. I would say that if you can't take a painful past, you're certainly not going to be able to handle a painful future, and pain will come.
Mm-hmm.
So you cannot have a relationship without some form of communication. You cannot be in a relationship and not communicate to the other person. So how can you be in an intimate relationship and not communicate intimate things?
How can you be in a relationship and not trust for forgiveness?
Well, I think that's what it comes down to. Is a lot of the reason you don't want to say something is fear or insecurity. Like you said, Calvin, sometimes you're like, how are they going to take this? Are they going to think differently of me? And so many people are insecure anyway, and especially this woman in the article, I think the reason that she does what she does is because she's insecure. She doesn't feel desired all the time. She doesn't feel like she is her husband's only one, for good reason. And insecurity, I think, drives a lot of what she does in particular. And I think that's the reason we keep a lot of things from each other.
Okay, well, wow, this has been an interesting conversation. I think we all agree that this is, I'm just going to go out there. This is crazy. I'm.
It's like when Paul talks about an abomination that not even the pagans commit.
Right. I think that what it should do, and it hasn't gotten me to this place yet, but it should drive me to a place of sorrow and prayer for her. And I'm not there yet. I'm in a place where I'm just like incredulous about what she's doing, even though it's becoming more and more prevalent in our culture and more accepted. Like you said, Kara, it's in Red Book. A lot of women read this, so now they're all like, "What? Maybe I'm gonna have an affair." Or a lot of them are reading, 50 Shades of Grey. It's like, "What? Maybe I want a guy to beat me and pee on me." That's just that's just deviant, people. Okay, this is not. Some things are not right. And I'm sorry for the conservative listeners who just heard that. I apologize. It's in the book. I'm not just saying that. And I read it so that other people don't have to. So, but yeah, I want to judge. Obviously, I'm going to judge the actions as wrong. These actions are sinful. They're not in a marriage. They're not in a true relationship. They are doing wrong by their children. I would say that they don't even love their children. As much as they may convince themselves, and as much as, French people might think that they do love their children.
Once
again, the French people are out there like, what? Chocolat bleu, we do not do this.
And they're also going, we don't really do that.
I could be wrong, but I think that France is actually one of the more morally conservative parts of Europe.
Yeah, French people right now are also like, we don't all say chocolat bleu. Stop saying that. But yeah, I mean,
Monsieur Leblanc, we don't say chocolat bleu.
I guess the challenge, I guess, would be for us and for anybody who's listening to this podcast to get on your knees and pray for this woman. And I don't want to be overly Christian here, but I don't want to be non-Christian at all. This woman needs Jesus. This woman's husband needs Jesus. Their relationship needs Jesus. That's the only thing that's going to make their relationship a true and deep and lasting and abiding marriage. Because right now, what they have is not one. So, it's easy to comment. It's harder, much harder to pray. So, matter of fact, I'm going to end this podcast. We've never done this before. I'm going to end this podcast with prayer. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll sign off, and you guys can email us your thoughts at jacobsessions3228@gmail.com if you want. But we're going to pray for this young lady, and we're gonna sign off. Heavenly Father, we just lift up this relationship to you. This is so broken. I don't even know where you would even begin to fix things, God. But I pray that you would slowly begin to reveal to them yourself and what it means to seek after you first, and then that you would begin to repair the breach in their marriage, that you would make them see that this is a covenantal relationship, that it is an exclusive relationship, a place that hedges one another in, a place of real trust and commitment, and a place that protects children and raises children in an environment where they feel safe. I pray that you would grab hold of their hearts, grab hold of their lives, grab hold of their relationship, and create a marriage. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
All right, y'all. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for being here and being a part. And I will keep you both on the short list of people we'd like to have on the podcast again in the future. And Josh, thanks again so much for hopping in last minute and asking, hey, do you want somebody on? That's
not a problem. Enjoyed it.
That's cool. And Kara, always a pleasure to have the accomplice back with us. The accomplice. We tried to do this whole this failed advice thing, and just didn't.
Nobody needed advice.
Nobody. I was creating fake people to ask advice, and no one ever sent us an actual letter. Oh well, we were hoping to jumpstart that. But you guys have a good night. I've got a young lady who I plan to marry one day. I need to hop on Skype with her and talk with her for a little bit. So I'd like to get married before David does. So that's my goal.
Well, I'm probably not going to be able to do that for some time. So
yeah, well,
we have a head start.
I'm just saying, it doesn't even matter who it is. I just want to beat you. That's all it is to me.
One thing, right?
One thing above you. But you guys have a good night. Thanks so much for joining in.
Bye,
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
See you.